And again, it's not about how much you earn. The amount of people that we've seen with consumer debt that have incomes 2, 3, 4 times your average household income, it's incredibly common and it's too easy to do.
How much you keep.
Yeah.
And not only how much you keep, but what do you do with it?
Welcome to 360 Money Matters, where financial planners Billy and Andrew talk all things financial planning. This podcast aims to increase your knowledge and confidence with all things money. Each week, they will cover topics such as investing, cash flow, budgeting, saving, passive income, debt management, and much more, so you can live a life on your terms without limits.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 360 Money Matters podcast. I'm Billy and I'm joined by my co-host.
Andrew, Bills, how are we? We're good today?
Andrew, we are always good on the podcast.
Yeah.
Talking to our listeners and our viewers about a whole range of stuff. Today's no different. Looking forward to getting right into this one because this
is our bread and butter. We love this topic.
We love this topic. And I must say, in terms of the people that we help day in, day out, this is the stuff that we're talking to them about.
Yeah.
Look, I'm already excited. I can't sit in my seat properly. Andrew, what are we talking to everybody about today?
So today we're really talking about just having conflicting priorities or having conflicting things when you're running through your cash flow and you're running through your budget. So we're talking about private school fees, we're talking about holidays, we're talking about home upgrades. Like, how do you juggle all of these competing financial goals? How do you just sift through all of that stuff?
Want, need, the emotional impact.
Yeah.
I get it. It's not easy. It's definitely a challenge, but we are going to unpack it.
Yeah. And this is what we do. Like, this is a lot of the conversations that we're having with the vast majority of our clients. It's exactly in this bracket. You're talking to people that, maybe there's kids, maybe there's a mortgage, you still want to go on a holiday and enjoy your life, but at the same time, you still need to invest and do retirement planning. But, is private school fees going to be something that I can afford? Can't I afford it? But we also potentially want to upgrade the family home. Like, there's just so much going on in such a short period of time. How do you do it?
I mean, ultimately, and I think this is the case with sort of most points in your life, but if you think about something, a really simple concept where you're talking income, less expenses, and then obviously whatever's left over, you've got your surplus, right?
Yep.
The question that we're really trying to answer here is, what should I do with that surplus and where am I going to get the most bang for buck? So let's start with, maybe we'll talk about a person's values or a household or a couple's values rather than just the numbers themselves. Because I think you need to identify what really matters most, because where you attribute your surplus or your money to, I think if you're attributing that towards the things that you value the most, and we'll use some examples and stuff in a sec, that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. And there's no right or wrong with this, because everybody's different. Everybody's interpretation is different. We deal with some families that are happy enough to live, a really basic lifestyle, but they want to give all of this opportunity to their children, and that's kind of the identity that they've taken on. So that's what they value, and that's how they're going to do it. No matter what we say and, encourage them to maybe enjoy their lives a bit more or what have you, they're not going to do it. But, that could be an education cost versus a lifestyle cost versus being financially independent. Figuring out what works for you in terms of where you derive the most amount of value, and then start assigning your dollars to that.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, truth be told, there's very few people that you're going to be able to do everything without making any sacrifices. I mean, of course, you're going to get some financial advice. You're hopefully going to improve your budget. You're going to do all of that stuff. But the fact of the matter is, the very few times you sit down in front of a client, you start talking about all of this stuff, and it's like, yep, kids are going to the most expensive private school. We're going on a holiday every year. We're driving new cars. We're going to upgrade the family home. We're doing renovations, and everything can happen all at the same time. It's normally an element of prioritization. What do you value more? What's more important to you and your family? And one is what's more important to you right now. Yeah. But having a dynamic budget and having a dynamic decision as to where you're going to allocate money has to form part of all of this. Because, okay, today, this is super important to me.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that next month, next year, whatever, that's still going to be the case. You need to relook at it. You need to make sure that, hey, is this actually what I still want? And ask yourself that question. Because all too often, we sit down in front of people and you're reviewing things 12 months later. They're like, yeah, I know I said that, but
It's changed.
It's changed. You know, something's happened in your life and you've had a, complete change of mind, or, maybe nothing's happened and you've just decided that, hey, that's actually really not that important to me anymore. So making sure that you're constantly reviewing it and making sure that your priorities, as they've shifted and adjusted, that your plan has also shifted and adjusted as well.
I think from a practical sense, there's probably two things to point out with that. So one, having the dynamic mindset around the fact that stuff does and can change and most likely will. And then depending on how you, manage your money with the budgeting system that you've got, having flexibility with the tools that you've got to be able to then pivot and say, okay, if it's not what it used to be, how do I then incorporate that into my financial position today to then be able to divert some of that money or that surplus or whatever it is into those things where I'm deriving the most amount of value and where I want to spend my energy on. So I think just from a practical sense, it needs to work for you, because you're right. It's not like it happens on the, 1st of January each year and you set your financial goals for the year and they don't change for 12 months time until you review it again. So yeah, look, I think that's a really good practical one. One of the ones that we talk to a lot of, our client base about, is probably one that a lot of people will be familiar with, is making the sacrifice around private school fees. So being in a position where they can, let's face it, if you're paying for private school fees, you're making a trade-off decision in terms of, do I divert the money towards, educating our children to, the best school that we feel is appropriate for their circumstances, or do we take that and divert it somewhere else? Just on the private school thing, it's not just the cost of the education. You need to factor in a lot more of that. And I can attest to that. As they start to get older, more and more stuff becomes an opportunity for them, which gets more and more expensive. And kids generally get more expensive as they get older as well too. Tuition, uniforms, excursions, camps, laptops, sports, co-curricular activities, musical instruments. The list just goes on and on and on.
Camps are more expensive when you're at a private school versus other school. And look, it's the reason that we talk about this is, and maybe this is something that we should have addressed at the start rather than sort of halfway through, but it's always a balancing act. Yep. All too often, everyone thinks, I just need to earn more money. It's not about that. And I think that maybe the perfect example, I'm not going to obviously, show any names, but I had a client that was telling me this. And he's like, Andrew, I didn't think that I would need to be thinking about all of this stuff around budgeting, around cash flow, around any of that stuff with my income.
Yeah.
And he earns $700,000 a year. So pretty solid income, right? And he's like, look, I'm not crying poor. And that's not what I'm trying to say here. But he's like, look, okay, I earn $700,000 a year, so my wife doesn't work. Mm-hmm. What's the point of her going and earning an income? She maybe has the capacity to maybe earn 100. There's no point. She stays at home and looks after the household and the kids. On my $700,000 a year income, say 50% of it goes to tax. I know it's a bit less, but let's just, let's make it $350. It's like, I earn $700,000, so I live in a nice area and I have a mortgage that's associated with it. Okay, well that, rips out close to
30% of it?
Yeah, close to $100,000 in mortgage repayments. Okay, my, $350 is now down to $250. It's like, okay, I also pay for private school fees. It's got 3 kids. It's $35,000 a year per kid. Okay, say that's another $100,000. Okay, now that $250 is now down to $150,000. It's like, I still haven't even considered holidays, a car, investing, putting money aside for a rainy day, putting money aside for kids to help them out with a deposit and all of that stuff. And so what this really, I hope, illustrates is not that, someone earns $700,000 and is crying poor, but it doesn't actually matter how much money you earn unless you're constantly thinking about what are my priorities.
Yeah.
It's never going to be enough.
Yeah. And I think that the key thing to point out with that as well too is that, like anything, where your attention goes or where your energy goes and flows and all of that sort of stuff, even though 700 is a huge number, when you started adding at least those two things, being the mortgage repayment and then the cost of school fees, that's really significant. And you can't do anything with either of those. Maybe with the mortgage, you could, interest only or what have you, but put that aside. When you start factoring in all of that stuff, if that person is not paying attention to the rest of their budget and where that additional, I think you said $150,000 is going and is split up, before you know it, you could become, and there's probably leases and stuff with cars and bits and pieces, but you could get trapped in that being a high income earner, but you've actually got a really tight noose around your neck and you've got no room to move. Not only because, you've got those financial commitments, but is the expectation that, hey, we earn big numbers, we're good. So we'll go and book that, holiday and put it on the credit card and
all too often
business class flights. And before you know it, that surplus that you've got has now shrunk. Maybe it's gone to a deficit and you've racked up some credit card debt or some consumer debt on the side.
Yeah. So I think the real key takeaway is understand your values, because if for you, a $35,000 a year school plus all of the other expenses that are associated with it is something that you really value, then fine, no worries. But understand that there is going to be something that's going to have to, in essence, suffer as a result of it.
Yeah.
Or is it, hey, let's look at, maybe a $15,000 a year school or a public school and pay for private tuition, or just understanding what your priorities are and understanding what you have the capacity to do is what's the really big key takeaway in all of this.
That's a good segue. Let's use something else as an example. Let's think about, say, home improvements and what does that look like, and the trade-off with, say, financial progress and the difference between a want and a need associated with that. Because, and Andrew, this is something that you're going through as well too, but you could renovate and spend unlimited amounts of money.
Yep.
Emotionally, that probably works. Financially, in terms of
bills.
financially, in terms of resale value, you have to think about what that looks like. Is it lifestyle? Is it resale value? Is it an emotional, value or return that you're expecting to get? And if you're not clear on that, it could just run and become a big issue.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that you need to, the temptation, particularly when it comes to property in Australia, is, it's fine, I'm going to do renovations and whatever money that I put into it, I know I'll be able to get out of it. But if this is a property that you don't have a desire to sell, then it's not benefiting. It has no investment decision. So understand, yes, I can spend,
it's a good one,
I can spend an unlimited amount of money in this. And hey, maybe in 30 years time, my kids may benefit when they eventually sell the property. But how much have I sacrificed along the way in order to be able to do it? And the biggest ammunition that we can give to clients when we start talking about all of this is by using the power of compound interest and the power of time. So if you can plan for the fact that, hey, I don't know whether I want to send my kids to private school. I don't know whether I want to upgrade my family home. I don't know. But if you can start putting a small amount away, maybe in your early 20s, maybe in your early 30s. If you can plan for it before that expense comes due, and you can take advantage of, hey, I put $100 today, but then that $100 is growing, it's invested, and it has the ability to become more, then there's something that you can there's a lever that you can pull. Whereas if you wait until this expense comes due and you're not looking forward beyond your toes, all that's going to happen is you're constantly reacting, and all you're going to be doing is sacrificing, because all you're going to be looking at is, hey, I need to meet this expense. Okay, well, I need to either overspend, take it on credit, and all of a sudden I'm in a negative asset position, or I need to sacrifice something else. Whereas you plan early, you start putting money aside early for all of these expenses. You factor into your budget, hey, this is how much I spend on holidays per year. And if that number, if you've only got $10,000 in a holiday account and your holiday is going to be a big European holiday, it's going to cost 25, well, I'm sorry, but you can't do it until next year.
Yeah.
So factor all of this stuff in and make sure that you're planning early and you're discussing, hey, is this still important? And hey, maybe that education fund that you have for your kids, once they get to high school and you say, hey, I've got, maybe $200,000 there, and that was the intention was for education, but I can actually fund this out of my cash flow. And I'm going to give them a deposit when they turn, 25 and they finish uni, or maybe it's, hey, I'll fund 50% from there and 50% from cash flow. But planning early gives you options, and not having a plan is a plan to fail.
Good cliche, Andrew. I like it. From a practical sense, I mean, obviously what we're saying, makes sense, right?
We're saying it, so of course, makes sense to us.
How do you then take that forward? Because all of this is, what I'm hearing here is you need to have clarity, you need to have discipline, you need to have systems. Let's pivot into, and obviously we're going to, toot our own horn here, so to speak, but let's pivot into, because somebody listening to this might be going, that's all great, guys, but how do we actually do that? Because stuff's hard. Like, you scroll online and this great thing pops up and I need that, and one-click purchase and all this sort of junk. How do you then take what we're saying and apply that in a practical sense? And how does, advice, tooting our own horn, how does that play into it?
How it plays into it is you need to have a proper cash flow and budgeting strategy first. So first and foremost, you need to have an actual strategy of money comes in, this is where it gets allocated, and I don't pull any more out because, I've decided that, I want to go out to eat 3 times this week because I can't be bothered.
Can I just bust a myth on that one, Andrew?
Yeah.
Regardless of your household earning or household income, you need it.
100%.
Whether you're earning the average amount that a household earns, or if you're that example where it's 700,000, everybody needs it.
Exactly. Because if you don't have it, it's too easy to say, hey, I earn $700,000. I have to be driving. I have to drive the newest Merc. My kids have to go to private school. Like, that lifestyle creep is too easy.
Got to go to Europe for the holidays.
Exactly. Whereas if you, let's say, started when your income was $100,000 and you created a cash flow plan and your income increased and that became 200 and 300 and 400, every time your income increased, the only way that you would spend more money is if you sat down and made a decision that, hey, I'm going to allocate more to this or that. And by doing so, you're reassessing your values, you're reassessing your goals, you're re-understanding why it is that I'm doing something, and you're avoiding that lifestyle creep of, hey, let's just, bolt this on, bolt this on, bolt this on, bolt this on.
Plus, no credit cards or personal debt or payday loans or anything like that. Because what it does do is it gives you the ability to spend more than you earn.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to chop that at the knees, because essentially with something like this, the very least that you could do, or the very worst that you could do, is spend everything that you earn. And that's better than spending more than you earn going into credit card or consumer debt.
Yeah. And again, it's not about how much you earn. The amount of people that we've seen with consumer debt that have incomes 2, 3, 4 times your average household income, it's incredibly common and it's too easy to do.
How much you keep. And not only how much you keep, but what do you do with it?
Yeah, exactly right.
Andrew, I reckon we could have spoken about that one for a complete hour, to be honest with you on that. And maybe we need to do a follow-up episode and do a little bit more of a deeper dive in that, because I really enjoyed that. But thank you for today.
Thanks, Bills. Appreciate it. Thanks to our viewers and our listeners. Appreciate you tuning in. If you got some value out of it, like, subscribe. Feel free to reach out to Billy and myself if you did want to discuss your own personal situation. We look forward to catching you on the next podcast.
Peace.
Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions on what we talked about or would like to have a chat about your money journey, visit us at 360fs.com.au.
The information in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal objectives, financial situation, or needs. It is not financial, legal, or tax advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should consider whether the information is appropriate to your circumstances and seek professional advice before acting on any of the information provided. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance. This information is provided by Billy Amaritis and Andrew Nicolaou of 360 Financial Strategists Proprietary Limited, authorised representatives and credit representatives of Acumen Financial Planning Proprietary Limited.